Hello everyone, good afternoon, welcome to QE Babble. Thanks for joining us today. For those who don't know me, I'm Matt. I'm from a company called High Affinity and I'll be hosting today's conversation. High Affinity is a UK-based testing and QE recruitment partner. Today's session is called Test the AI, Dammit, and it's a topic that's getting a lot of attention across the QE space right now because, let's be honest, AI is changing quality engineering. Of course it is. We all know it. We're seeing increased automation, more teams leaning on AI tools and new ways of building software emerging almost weekly. But nobody really seems to fully agree on what it actually means for testers. So today we're going to dig into some of those pretty tough questions around that. Things like, can you actually test for AI bias, which is a really big and interesting topic on its own. And with the rise of things like vibe coding, are testers and can testers still be the line in the sand, that critical line in the sand, that guardrail? And when does human judgment and critical thinking become the most important QE skill of all? So in terms of how today's going to run, QE Babble isn't a webinar, it's a conversation, it's a debate. So we'll start with a few questions to keep things going and then let the discussion flow between the panelists. And really, most importantly, we'd like to get other people involved as well. So if you are watching today, thanks so much for joining. Do share your opinions and your views on this topic. I'm sure there are views on what's happening in the industry right now with AI. So if anything that the panelists say sparks some thought or a challenge, a different opinion even, please drop it into the comments because I will try and flash those up on the screen, get your opinion shared too, and even ask the questions to the panelists a little bit later on in the session. So I will bring the panelists in now. Hi, Richard. Hi, Rob. Thanks for joining.
Hi, Matt. How you doing?
Hi, Matt.
Good, thank you. Thanks very much. So yeah, today we've got Rob Lunt. So he's head of quality engineering for Planet. So he's bringing a kind of leadership perspective to where he thinks QE might be heading. In fact, it was Rob's LinkedIn post a few months ago that inspired the event today. So thanks Rob for that. And then Richard, so hi Richard. Richard Williams is a principal QA at Modular Data. He's been working in the quality space for many years. And with Richard, I've been talking to him about some of the exciting things that he's doing around AI at the moment and tool innovation. So hopefully we'll get a chance to look at some of that as well. So yeah, thanks for sharing your time. They've both just told me they've done loads of homework and prep for this. So again, really appreciate that. Yeah,
Those who know me will know that's not the case.
Well, let's see. So let's jump in. So first question is again inspired from something that Rob mentioned or posted a few months ago, and it's about AI bias, which I thought was really interesting. So with the rise of AI tools and things like vibe coding, mass code generation through LLMs, what implications are there for bias in software engineering, and how do testers play a role in that?
Sure, thanks. So I was inspired to write that article a couple of months back, and it was based on conversations I'd had in the past with some software engineers that I'd worked with at a previous organization that were tasked with looking at bias within data. And it also drilled into anybody that's got a Amazon Echo or an Alexa app and you shout out Alexa to it and it starts doing anything, that actually if you've got a female voice, it doesn't pick it up as well. So bias is already in that system. And then there was an event that I went to last year, and the testers who I was talking to, the head of testing I was talking to, they were being told they cannot test the AI, which for me went that, no, sorry, if it's been created by humans, it can be tested by humans. It's simple as that, right? Just in the same way as, you know, if a car has been built by humans, it can be repaired by humans. Then I was having a conversation with a colleague of ours, Pauline Harrison, who spent a lot of time researching AI, and I will freely admit is more of an expert on this type of thing myself, and having a conversation with her about her son. Her son had graduated from Oxford University with, I think it was a first in biochemistry, was applying for jobs, not really getting anywhere, like so many others of the youth these days. Mm-hmm. And one particular job they went through, it would be absolutely perfect. He ticked absolutely every single box that was going in there. But equally, her son was autistic as well. And I do the same thing. If I'm applying for a job, I tick the box, say, yes, do you have any learning difficulties? Yeah, I'm dyslexic. So, I want people to know that, and I acknowledge that it's there. My own children, my youngest, they are autistic with ADHD. And I would say that my eldest is also ADHD as well. So it comes from here. In Pauline's case and her son, they found out that the place they were applying to was using a new AI hiring tool. All right. So it wasn't an ATS, it's a next level up. And when he applied, there was no acknowledgement. No, you're not qualified, and you're not qualified enough, not even an interview or anything like that. So Pauline, being the right sort of mother and all the rest of it, said, hang on a minute, that doesn't sound right. Started asking some questions. Luckily, the CIO of that particular organization turned around and said, okay, it's a new system, help me understand what the problem is. And she said, well, let me look at your data that you're using to train the AI, because, most corporate systems, they're not just like a little agent that sits on there on their own and creates stuff. It has to use data, and good data. It's the old adage, bad data in, bad data out. And within 5 minutes or so, she'd gone through the data and said, well, I can see what your problem is. You're training AI on past people that have been successful in terms of the recruitment, but none of them have ticked the disability box. Now, if you think about all of the systems that we're implementing today, that are automated, that use AI, voice recognition, all those type of things that are there, that are supposed to be there to help us make things easier, gain back time, make things more efficient, that actually we are training that AI to be bad. Yeah, it's not picking out through those details. So that got me thinking, okay, if I go back 25 years, nearly 30 years, when I was a tester, if I was given that challenge that, no, I can't test it because it's AI and it's supposed to come up with its own thing, how would I test it? How would I look to say whether it's working or not? Let's face it, in the UK, we don't have any standards we can work to now. It's not like GDPR, where that information around securities came in, and data protection, that we had a good log that worked against. From a UK point of view, we're still kind of sitting on the fence. We're not quite sure what we're doing. Europe, on the other hand, they're embracing it. I think it's going through, it's either not quite there yet, but it's being introduced certainly this year, of standards of working to AI, similar to GDPR, so that, people don't necessarily lose their jobs out for, because of AI, or equally, because AI is using a lot of data, that it is transparent on how that AI is using your data. Now, it would be interesting to do a poll or something like that in a couple of weeks' time, and asking companies that are using AI, what are they using the data for that they're training the AI for? Now, if you think about it, if a banking, Experian, stuff like that, those organizations that do credit ratings, are they going to start using AI? Are they going to train it on false data, where you have a housing estate, which isn't exactly the most perfect of housing estates, but one person who's kept themselves completely squeaky clean in terms of paying bills, not going into debt, etc., does have a credit rating. But because they live in that particular area, AI goes, no, there's too much data, there's too much information to be negative on that. So therefore, that person's not going to get a loan. That person's not going to be able to get a mortgage. And these are the things that we should be challenging ourselves in quality engineering, is like, we appreciate it's a very powerful tool. To use the old adage, with great power comes great responsibility. But how do we use critical thinking? How do we use our own intelligence to understand if it is being fair and it is not being biased? And that's where that particular article stemmed from. And that's now turning into my headache of how we can work that through as an overall package to help either clients or people that are using AI, that it's being used in an ethical and intelligent way. I mean, Anthropic themselves last week, their own principals, not their AI, but their own principals, turned around to the Pentagon and said, you're not using this for tracking purposes. And they lost out on a $141 million contract. OpenAI, yeah, we're the guys, we'll do it, not a problem. So again, thinking about what the ethics are behind it, thinking about how it's working, how it's operating. Don't get me wrong, I'm not negative about AI. I use it myself, but thinking about how you're using it in anger with companies, with selling things, information, how it's used, how it's created. That's the key thing around the bias within AI. And I'll shush now.
No, it's really interesting. I've got a couple of questions I'm going to ask you, but I'll come to Richard first. So thanks for waiting patiently, Richard. It's a chunky topic, bias. We could do the whole session on bias. We're not going to. But what's your view?
I mean, yeah. So I've got very similar views to Rob, if I'm perfectly honest. I think, but my response is somewhat more, I guess, technical in its application. So I think for me, can we test AI bias? I think we can, but I think it needs to be acknowledged that you don't test bias in the same way that you would do, say, testing deterministic logic. So traditional software would be input equals predictable output. AI systems just behave differently. As a tester, or when you're looking at testing and quality engineering, you need to consider the training data assumptions, the distribution of outputs, some of the edge case behavior, your decision boundaries, the system incentives. I guess the bigger issues, the governance. So like in a regulated environment, the key question probably becomes, can you explain why the system produced that outcome if you're looking at it from an AI bias? And I think that's where the QE intersects with the governance and the accountability.
Okay. I've written down here, we're talking about the implications of using AI tools and how it affects bias. I suppose if you look at it, if we accept that there is bias, discrimination that happens with when humans are assessing these things. Your example there about a university application, going back to when this new AI system wasn't in place, it would have been more than likely a human who was doing it, using their own judgment, interpretation, and their own inherent biases, whatever they may be.
Yep.
Could the argument be made, for just kind of trying to be positive, maybe for a second, could the argument be made that if the AI system was trained in the right way, with the right data, and had the right governances in place, it's actually a positive that humans possibly aren't as involved in these processes?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is what I mean. It's sort of, if biased is inherently a human thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So therefore, if you took straight AI out of the box and said, right, my criteria is X. Okay, my criteria is that they must have a minimum of 2-1. Well, what does that mean to AI? It's like 2-1 and above. Okay, cool, tick. Person must have chemistry engineering, tick. Yeah, must live within 30 miles of the office, right? Because that still can be an element of, yeah, we don't want people to be commuting too much. There could be that element of looking after the people who you're working, and that's perfectly legitimate. When you're giving it that straight information, it's great. But if you're just using a standard sort of, here is all the data, work out who is the most prized candidate, without those boundaries and those guardrails in place, then yes, it can end up being just as biased as what you could, that conscious and unconscious bias. So yes, if you're building it in an effective way and you're putting those guardrails in place and those principles in place, then yeah, it will save you time. It will be more efficient. It will have less inherent bias than you have. But that's where you've got to correlate it, the two. That's where you've got to have that critical thinking, how we're actually going to train this. But yeah, as I said, if you're using AI tools, it is more efficient, it is quicker, but as we all know, it also has, what some people call the brain farts of, it's just going to give you a load of information that it's never really thought of, or you've asked it about it. But if you just train it effectively, then yes, it is very powerful. It is very efficient. It's very optimistic. It's good for any organization.
I suppose the kind of scary thing about it is that because the answers come back so instantly, its speed is one of its great powers, that sometimes people will overlook the fact that it needs to be trained with all these different elements that you've spoken about already, and that quality engineers might need to look at. I'll just add this in here. So someone called Brendan is watching, which I think is interesting. So thank you for this, Brendan. I'm going to flash it up. He says, working in fintech, and worth noting that discriminatory decisions is not a novel challenge. Take mosaic data and other demographic aggregating tools, for example. And he said the novel challenge is that it's no longer deterministic, as Richard says.
And I think on what Rob said and what you were mentioning there around the use of AI, I find that the AI element accelerates the analysis. It doesn't replace the judgment. It compresses reasoning, but it never should own any kind of decisioning. It's very good at pattern detection. It's very good at clustering of information. It's very good at identifying anomalies. Far better, far faster, far more superior to a human. But it can't determine what your organizational risk tolerance might be. It can't say what the regulatory consequences could be. It can't say what the architectural intent of a change is, or what the business impact might be. That judgment should always and will always remain human. If we allow the AI to decide what matters, it's not innovation, it's abdication. That's not the future, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Go on.
No, carry on, Matt. Carry on.
Just going to flash up some. So Ashwin's watching. So Ashwin said data bias, representation gap, skew, leakage, historical bias, model bias, disparate impact, equalizers, demographic parity, outcome bias, how the model behaves in real workflows, not just in a lab, contextual bias, how humans interpret or rely on the model's output. There's so many different things to think about, isn't there?
Absolutely. I mean, this is what we don't tend to give credit to humans about. We're actually very good at context switching. We're actually very good at understanding what is morally and ethically right. I'm not going to go into any further detail than that, but when working with AI, you are practically just asking it one particular question, and it can only use the information that is available to it. It can't necessarily use any historical context either. So as Richard said, in terms of risk, you can have your risk register within a particular project, and you can say, and you'll always have that bingo card game of, right, which is the higher risk? Is it something, what's the assumptions behind it? What's it turned into? Is it going to be a problem? But the people in that room who have actually delivered several projects over a period of, say, 10, 15 years might go, well, actually, what we're doing here is very similar to X, and X gave us problems here and here. Can we have someone check it first or look into it? AI wouldn't be able to do that for you unless it's got the context and the information previously, or if you prompt it to ask that particular question. Because it's like working with a 5 or 6 year old. It can give you the answer, and it can over give you the answer if it wants to. But if you ask it another question, will it actually have the answer to that? And the question, generally the answer is no, unless you ask it to look again. I mean, particularly if you're building out any particular large information stacks, you've got to constantly read it, understand it, go back through it, and ask questions again. And you're right in terms of saying that instantaneous gratification response it gives you. Yeah, it's very similar to Douglas Adams' writing in terms of all the robots and lift doors and telephones had that emotional chip in there that basically said, happy to help. It's really great to see you today. Thank you for passing through this door. And if you use Gemini, ChatGPT, or Copilot, it's starting to do that to get you engaged into using it more and more. Even though the moment you get past, say, 5 or 6 or even 10 questions within a thread chat, it starts to have hallucinations as well. So, it is a very powerful platform, but it's a very tricky one to use as well.
I think on that as well. I think we're probably stating very similar points, but I've often felt that human judgment is really becoming that differentiator. And it kind of segues into one of the common topics that people are often fearful of with AI, which is, will testers disappear? Will testing disappear? And I don't think it will. I just think it's the script execution may shrink, but strategic judgment grows significantly. So that consequence modeling, that architectural reasoning, the challenging ambiguous requirements, the understanding failure impact or cross-system risk or context from previous implementations, all of that grows from a human QE perspective. I mean, when I built my own AI-driven requirements engine, the first version classified everything as critical. I mean, from that, I learned that it's quite important. Detection's easy, but calibration is the hard part. And that calibration is the human judgment layer. And that's where you're adding the real value on top of what AI is presenting back. It can give you a lot of information very quickly, but the human is the person that is that key point of differentiation and adding the real value across the information that you've been provided. I've posted about human in the loop, quality engineering across a series of posts. And I think that has to be one of the key and most appropriate use cases for AI in QE, in testing, in assurance, is an accelerator, not a replacement, because of the judgment.
Let me just flash this one up and then we'll move on to the next question. It says LinkedIn user, but it's Gokul Sridharan, who I know. So thanks for the contribution, Gokul. He said, I think the problem is we don't know who is responsible for the bias and can't blame the technology here. Should we not think about implementing an audit process for these models where we can find out which model generated the output so that the person implementing the model or the company doing that is responsible for owning it at enterprise level? And then there's another point here which I'm going to put on as well, which I think is I don't know how you solve this really, because I think the human intelligence is so critical. Rob, we were just talking about the whole university point. So Jules has said, even though clear criteria, a 2-1 distance from office, degree could be biased, as human intelligence, I would read the narrative that says, I live in Reading, but will be moved into Edinburgh after graduation, or the context key of a care leaver for whom achieving a 2-2 may be such an incredible achievement, showing grit and determination, I guess overcoming the odds and everything else going on in that person's life, that they wanted to interview and assess that potential for themselves. And by using an AI tool like the one you described at the start of the conversation, you probably would miss that person and have rejected them based on the criteria laid out, such as the 2-1. So really difficult. But let's move on, because that's a great topic and we could talk about it more. But I want to talk about. I do want to talk about vibe coding specifically. There's lots of different tools that obviously allow people in business to do this, but Vibe coding is an incredible thing. And I want to just see what people think about where testers now fit in with mass code generation. It's coming. It's already ingrained in a lot of technology teams. How are testers still going to be the line in the sand, do we think? Richard, do you want to give us a bit of a steer on this?
Yeah, I suppose, and having done this firsthand and used it in this space, it can be hugely powerful and massively dangerous, and it can get things very wrong very quickly if you're not careful. But I think it's about looking at the risk, and I often frame testing, quality engineering, and assurance around risk because that's why we do what we do. But I think for me, it's the risk moves from syntax to structure, because generated code, it can compile correctly, it can pass unit tests, it can look really professional, it can be some of the best code you've ever seen, but it may violate the architecture, it might break security models, it could introduce hidden dependencies, it could undermine governance controls, it could simply optimize the code to fix a particular problem and overwrite reams of additional functionality that you've already developed, proven, just to fix a specific problem. If you implement and paste code blindly without understanding the wider context and implication, then you can rapidly destroy whatever it was that you were attempting to build. So it's a very powerful tool if used responsibly. I think for me with the QA, the question shifts from does it run to does it align with the systems architecture, security, governance model? Does it deliver that capability that you're trying to achieve end to end? And if the answer to that is yes, then great, you've used AI effectively and it delivers the outcome that you're seeking to realize. But if it trips up on any of those checkpoints, it's failing. So for me, it's not less QA, it's earlier QA. It's where you start to assure and assess and validate in the life cycle of developing, building that change, and how you can assure across the models and what's been created. So that's my view on vibe coding and how it's used.
Okay. Rob?
I would agree with Richard. This goes back to the and I wish there was a better phrase for it, but shift left. Okay, in that isn't just about writing tests, right? That's actually about, to me, actually working with the software developer. The first job I had rephrase it. The second job I had in testing, it was a game studio in Warrington. Now I'd come from Sony, where we worked on the technical response stuff. So it was effectively, if you pull this controller out of COM port 1, it brings up a message on screen that says, please replace controller into COM port 1 to continue, right? Very static, very simple stuff. It was a tick box exercise to make sure it worked. They were called TCRs, I think, technical requirements. When I started working with another company, who's as a tester, they actively encouraged us to sit down with the software developer and actually work on those components directly for the game, so that the developer got the instant feedback, right? And the tester was able to understand how that was working in the game, to then actually when it came to the boring part of the tick boxes, you could say, yeah, functionally it works. Is it doing, basically it works. Now I can look at the edge cases, or now I can look at the real problems that are there. And I would say that from a test engineer now, it's less about, thanks to AI, it's less about having a lovely, audit trail of documentation, because the AI can take that on for you. But now it's actually asking real questions to the engineer and saying, right, how does this work? Why does it work that way? Can you put a test in around that particular piece of code that you've just got vibe coding to do, or base 44 to do, to actually then say, right, this is how this can be tested more effectively. So when it's added to the pipeline, it's already got that test in there, and it's better than a unit test, because it's actually come from two brains, the developer and the tester, actually critically thinking about how is that component going to work? How is that system going to work? And it does tend to be few and far between in terms of other applications I've worked on that actually testers work with engineers in that way. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying that now with AI, it means that you can have more of a, conversation about what the quality control is, but also what the quality assurance and the quality engineering can be directly with the developer, which you probably haven't had in the past.
Okay, thank you. Got some good stuff coming in here. So this is from Donna. It's nice to see Donna watching. Around vibe coding, I personally believe quality engineers are perfectly suited to take up this mantle. We naturally think about testability and testing up front. This is really what Rob was talking about a little bit there. Arguably, TDD comes more naturally to QAs. I think it's an exciting opportunity for us to rewrite how we get involved right at the beginning. So yeah, vibe coding is happening. It's going to happen. Not going away. Donna's point that getting involved right at the beginning could be super valuable to that kind of process. There's a point here from Ray. I know. So she said, "Do you think we have trained AI that this will not risk current manual testing roles? Automation is useful for repetitive testing. Will AI be able to do ad hoc tests that manual testers would pick up?" Richard, do you want to tackle that?
Yeah, I think on both of those, I think the real shift is structural. So I think across them, it's basically the biggest shift is that it's not that AI can write tests. I mean, that's clear. It can. We all are aware. But the biggest shift that AI reduces the cost of analyzing complexity. And that's got implications. It means we can analyze large specifications faster. It means we can detect structural inconsistencies earlier. We can identify risk concentration earlier. And it means we've got fewer excuses for structural blind spots. But it doesn't replace the need for the person that can apply that human context, that human awareness, that ethical lens, that governance layer, that decisioning. So I think, yes, to the point where the tester can be better engaged, better involved, well enabled and capable to deliver this 100%. That bridges a gap that I think has been outstanding for some time, and AI is rapidly closing that. It's often been a lot more expensive to use expensive engineers, be it developer, tester, or whoever, to bridge, and AI is starting to close that. So we'll start to see, I guess, an efficiency there. But in terms of the manual testing angle, I think manual testing always has a place. It's been massively reduced over the years as automations improved and been more widely adopted. But I think with the emergence of AI, manual testing's always needed, be it to test in a more traditional sense and how it's been run in the past, but also now more looking at the complexity and what's being presented and what's being recommended and proposed by the AI. It may be that you're manually assessing what's being recommended rather than a system under test or a version that touches on multiple points in that space. Because I think that's where the mindset and the focus and the assurance and governance needs to sit.
Okay. Do you want to take a couple of minutes to explain this tool you've been working on, Richard? Give us like a 60-second snapshot of like.
I'll give yeah. So I'll summarize several months of very late nights, evenings, weekends, and very tired eyes into a 20-second answer, I guess. So ultimately, I've built this. It's a rules-driven assurance engine that analyzes delivery artifacts and surfaces structured risk patterns. It doesn't generate tests. It's not a test generator. It's not a test bot. It doesn't approve releases. But what it does do is it compresses the time it takes to go from analyzing a document and creating a credible view of delivery risk, but it keeps humans firmly in the loop. So it looks across any kind of requirement specification. It can look at any number of different types of document styles, and it uses its complex rule structure to analyze across a range of risk categories, and it presents back an exec level recommendation on the level of risk and the potential implications for what it's assessed. And it also shows maps that represent risk concentration, and for each requirement it provides a specific breakdown into whatever risk that may be flagging, what's considered. But yeah, it's there to accelerate humans, not replace them. It's intended to I mean, the one I've been using in test has been a 60-page, 400 requirement document that is analyzed, processed, results generated that are defensible. I've validated and gone through at length and tested it to death. It does all of that in 5 minutes. So it's a powerful use of AI, but the AI is enriching the output. So it uses rules to generate what is then fed into AI, so that it limits the level of hallucination or gaslighting or whatever kind of guesswork that may occur within an AI. It doesn't exist in this because it's presented rules and specific requirements that are enriching an output rather than determining the output.
Yeah.
Are you using it in anger at the moment?
Occasionally, but it's more just testing it and seeking people that may want to have a go and see if it can benefit them, their organization, and beyond. But it's still relatively early days. But yes, I do use it when I get the opportunity to validate my own thinking, thought process, and try and fast track some of that long and laborious task.
Yeah, I think we're planning to do a session, aren't we? Maybe in sort of 4 to 6 weeks' time to bring it to life a little bit more, because I think it sounds really interesting. And I think we've sort of said it's quite different, isn't it? There's nothing else out there that's doing exactly what that's doing, so it is exciting. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'm just going to bring up a couple of other things that people have been saying while we've been talking.
Before you do that, Matt, can we come back to that question around does AI and vibe coding negate manual testers? Just had one of those poof like that in my head, and I would say yes and no.
Okay.
If I was a tester now, right? If I was just either getting into testing or I'd had like 2 years or so experience, I would say actually now, because of AI and all the different various tools around you, if you're a manual tester, you could be the first ones to say that you're a full stack tester, because it allows you to understand and do things like performance testing, security testing, automation, manual scripting. It can do analysis around FCA rulings and stuff like that can actually allow you to quickly, understand what the problems are. So it means that you can achieve anything you particularly need to do as a tester, and you can still do things manually as well. So I'd say that now is probably the biggest time that if you are a manual tester, you could actually start turning yourself into a full stack tester and actually be very good at it, because I'm one of the few people that still says I wouldn't get a plasterer to do a plumber's job. Yeah. In this, with AI now, it means you can start touching in that particular space.
I'd agree with that, Rob, as well. I think the question isn't whether testers disappear, it's the question's whether we evolve our skill set fast enough.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, completely. It's about evolving 100%. Quick one here on just going back to say, so apologies, I haven't got this person's name. I'm working on a sports analytic projection model in AI and testing, trying to find every single biased assumption. Which has been very time consuming, often based off previous analytics models, and I'm trying to improve on. It's requiring that human touch to override those biases, but without being biased myself. So I thought that was quite interesting. Okay, brilliant. This is really interesting. Next question was around human judgment. So we're talking about this already, really, but the question was, when does human judgment become the most important QE skill of all? So we talk so much, and I do in my job, about tools and technologies, experiences that people have got. They need, you need to work in this area, this area, this area. When we're talking about testers, the underlying thing to all of that is obviously is critical thinking and human judgment. How important do you think that's going to be as we move forward, folks? What do you reckon, Richard?
I mean, I think I mentioned it before, isn't it? That human judgment is that key differentiator. I think it's the critical part of this. It's what it's what's ultimately making those decisions, applying the ethical lens, applying the experience, the knowledge, and taking what is essentially a very complete, well-considered analytical dump, but turning that into something that makes sense for people, using human-created, thought-up, generated systems to be applied in a human environment. So I think there's no, as it stands today, now it doesn't mean that it's not going to be true of N years into the future, but that is one of the key things that AI struggles. It doesn't seem to be able to do or do effectively. Now, the rate at which it's evolving, developing, creating, it may address and close that gap. But for now, that human judgment is that key differentiator. It's that critical part in the loop that I just simply don't see being replaced with anything that's currently commercially or theoretically available.
Just to kind of change that then. So one could argue that it's easier to test and assess for sort of technical skills than it is for those things you're talking about there, human judgment, critical thinking. So if you're a tester trying to stand out and maybe in an application process for jobs, and you know that you have got that mindset, which is so important for testers, how do you get that across to companies in a way that they really see that you are the right type of character?
I think it's not necessarily limited to the individual. I think the companies also need to go on a bit of a learning journey. I think at the moment, companies are probably looking for more historic test, QA, quality engineering, resource people, individuals, and therefore job specifications reflect that, and they might have a nod to AI. Or what I've seen a lot is companies don't necessarily know, and Rob can probably speak to this far better than I can because he'll work with greater number of companies that are seeking this as a kind of a commercial engagement. But a lot of times I see companies not knowing what they actually want, and not knowing what they actually want as an implementation that is embracing AI then filters down to the types of roles that they're requesting and people that they're seeking. So yeah, is it tail wagging dog if we're trying to fix a problem that the recruiter or the recruiting party doesn't know that's the problem that they're trying to solve? I think there's a wider education piece because everybody's on this kind of precipice of AI, and what does it mean for them? What does it mean in their setting? What does it mean for their technology? And I mean, I posted about it in one of mine, which is this quality intelligence engineer role that I wrote in a previous post earlier this year. And for me, that's the quality engineer who is augmented with AI, because it then uses AI to do the heavy lifting, but they provide that capability, that human intelligence to that enriched data set. And that's where the person is adding maximum value. But putting that in the job spec, that's your job, Matt.
That is my job. Yeah.
I think it does boil down, because I saw something on LinkedIn the other day about someone saying, the problem is at the moment in terms of recruitment is you've got people's CVs that have been written by AI that are then being judged by AI.
Yeah.
So to me, I would always go back to basics. And to Richard's point about, sometimes you see a job spec and you read it and you go, okay, why isn't this role the CEO of the organization? Because that's how many things you're asking me to do. And I would always go back to basic principles and say, look, if you are recruiting, do you actually understand what you need and why you need them? And articulate that as part of your job spec, articulate that as part of your advert. So it then allows the element of the human creativity to say, yes, I can do that, and these are the examples that I can demonstrate about it. But if you're allowing the AI to try and work out the context, it's not there yet. Not saying it won't be at some point in the future, but I'm just saying at the moment it's not. It's still very much this is the rules that we've put in there, analyze it. If it doesn't come up, don't accept it. Coming back to the other one about the recognition of rule-based stuff like that, again, it sprung in there in my head. I would always go back to Isaac Asimov's 3 rules for robots, which is A robot may not injure, I've got it here, a robot may not injure a human or through inaction allow a human to come to harm. A robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. A robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict the first or second law. So if you're saying where your overall reach is, I would always say that, well, okay, criticality comes down. Does this affect someone's life? And if the answer to that is yes, test the hell out of it. If the answer to that is no, then yeah, you can get away with a little bit. I know it pains probably myself and others to think that, but it's like from a criticality point of view and a risk level, someone missing out on a new TV being delivered to them, yeah, that's pretty low risk. How's that going to affect their life per se, unless you're being really creative with your imagination? Or are you buying your medicine online now and you require insulin? Okay, that needs to be attested far more rigorously than the TV, and making sure that the right information is going across than it is, say, if you're just selling a TV, because actually insulin for someone who needs it, who's a type 1 diabetic, yes, that is a life and death situation. So therefore, making sure you're actually understanding the risk profile behind it and judging accordingly, then yeah, that's how I would look to whether you're using AI, whether you're not using AI, and you do more traditional testing, does it affect someone's life? Yes, right. You've got a job to do.
This is a great point, and again, apologies, it doesn't show me who's written this. AI doesn't remove the need for testing; it removes the need for shallow testing. What's left is judgment, risk modelling, defining acceptable uncertainty, which was always the hard part. This is Gokul again. Personally, think if teams use AI tools for vibe coding, then QA should prefer vibe testing format to generate automation test scripts to match the productivity of code generated. Else feels like devs using 2026 F1 car while QA is using 1980 F1 car. So I think he's saying match up the fact that you're using vibe coding with writing automated tests to test that rather than possibly manual testing.
I think on that though, I think you need to be. I agree. But I think you also need to be careful, and a little knowledge goes a long way when looking at these things. So if someone is looking to use things like vibe coding to generate automated tests, I'd always advise them to have a basic understanding in the language that they're using, because quite often you can use vibe coding to generate massive amounts of code with absolutely zero experience in software development in any kind of language or even using an IDE. What I have found is I've used vibe coding in creating my own platform. I've happily used it, but I've also got a background in software development in a range of languages. And what I did find was that when I was presented with questionable code, I had that gut feel and that ability to read what's being presented and understand that actually that's not delivering the outcome that I'm trying to achieve, and that's not an enterprise capability. That's a fast patch, a quick fix to an immediate problem because you were presented with an immediate problem, rather than something that puts a strategic foundation in place that allows the platform, the product to be developed professionally. So I think having that basic understanding of the technical languages that you're applying gives you the ability to then question the output that you're seeing from the AI. And again, that's another level of that QA engineering governance, that human assurance that you're applying across something that's generated, because that code could be perfect, but it doesn't deliver what you're trying to achieve. So I think, having that understanding is critical when we start to move to using these tools as accelerators for creating test suites.
Yeah. So this person here said in the current form, it makes for a good productivity tool to build quick base, but it's prone to hallucinations, so we should not become too dependent on AI, which leads on quite a lot from what you said there.
So you're absolutely right. So we at Planet, we've invested heavily in AI, and we have our own AI testing platform called Amplify, and it is very effective because it's been built by test engineers to do testing. Okay, so it's It's using common language. You understand what it's actually doing. It can produce, you can go in there and say, right, based on these requirements from JIRA or these changes, it will create the test cases for it. It will create the basic test scripts as well, as long as it's got that information. It can even then start creating the code you require if you're wanting to do automation tests around it. But even we say, okay, as part of the training to use that tool, you can't keep a thread as long as, say, 20 inputs, because otherwise it will start, because it's using ChatGPT as its core engine. But it does we do train people to say, no, you've still got to question it. You can't just go in there and accept it as gospel that it's working. I think the bit that I would find really, really interesting with people that are using vibe coding, so after managing software developers and et cetera, and DBAs in the past, who'd worked on multiple different little applications and apps and services and stuff like that, whenever a problem might come in, say they'd released a particular change 6 months ago and all of a sudden there's a problem or their needs changing, they'd be that first half a day where they're reminding themselves how that code is actually put together and what it's actually doing, and come back and go, why did I write it that way? That makes no sense at all. Now, if vibe coding can do that when it reads some code from 6 months ago and it does the AI equivalent, I go, why did I write it that way? That makes no sense. Then I think we've got things to worry about.
Someone I'm going to try and tackle this one actually. It's well aligned to what I do. In a job market where most roles are filled through referrals and networks, how can someone with limited context still break in and stand out, especially now that AI is reshaping hiring? I appreciate it's slightly different to what we've just been talking about, but AI in recruitment is a massive thing. My advice to Ashwin or anyone else is to be as human as you possibly can. And what I mean by that is with your CV, your LinkedIn, your activity on LinkedIn, any sort of activity that you might have on GitHub, put it all on there and show your opinion and your view on the state of QE, on the market in your own words. Try and get those points across as quickly as you can, because the mass generation of what we'd be talking about code, but job applications means that companies are bombarded by noise when they're hiring. But from what I hear from talking to them, they obviously don't want noise. They want results. So they want people who can show that kind of human side to them. Yeah, any opportunity to show your critical thinking, human judgment, and how important you think that is in the role of a tester, I think is really important. Obviously, your referrals and network is number one, the most important thing. If you haven't got that for whatever reason, if you're sort of new to the market or potentially new to the country, then yeah, it's absolutely is difficult. But I think those steps would really help and give you the best chance. And also networking as well, going to as many networking things as you possibly can. And there's lots of those around the country, which I post about regularly. There's one next week in Nottingham, which I'm going to, which is called PeersCon. If anyone's around Nottingham, it's 30 quid for a day. So I'll send a link to that later on. Sorry, a slight segue there, but I thought it was important to try and answer that point. Brendan here said, I can leverage AI tools to spin up boilerplate and proliferate human design patterns through use cases and failure modules. So there's so much you can do with it. But if we just go back to this point around around critical thinking, how if at all do you think that will evolve over the next, let's say, 12 to 18 months? Do you still see that as being really important for testers, or do you think AI is going to, Richard said, AI is advancing so much it might change and AI is going to become better, and there might not be the need for people to have that critical thinking? AI is going to do it for us. Is that a possibility?
No.
I don't think in 12 months.
I don't think ever, to be honest. I'll put it out there. The computational power you need in order to have real critical thinking is absolutely phenomenal. I'm not great with numbers, but I was chatting to a data architect a couple of years ago when we were talking about AI and its increase, and he's going, yeah, there isn't a data center created yet that could actually really think like a human or have that ability to do so. If you think about it, it's not just the thinking aspects of human criticality, it's also touch, feel, smell, eyesight. It's the whole lot. And when you're testing, if you're doing physical testing, if you're doing POS testing, if you're doing remote control testing, if you're using a touch screen or anything like that, AI can't do that. You either need a robot to do it or you physically need to do it. Now, this is something I would always say is that at the heart of anything, a good tester is born a tester. They're always asking why. They're the kids. I don't know what Richard was like, when he was a kid. I got a remote control car when I was 8 years old. After the batteries ran out, I got a screwdriver and undid it because I wanted to understand how it all worked and stuff like that. And that's what real testers are. It's what critical thinking is all about. Is asking why. Why is it working this way? How should I use it? It's like that old mean picture you see of like, that's the pathway. That is how it's built. And then that diagonal path along, that's how users use it. And a good tester knows that that's how that works. AI wouldn't know if that works unless it's trained to do it. And you're using the AI function or AI product that's been trained in that way. So no, humans would always add that element of critical thinking.
I also think it comes down to commercial investment and opportunity. So is there the commercial appetite? Because it will require, I can only imagine, significant investment, significant time, significant effort, both in physical data centers and beyond, to achieve that as an outcome. And what's the commercial advantage that it gives whoever achieves that? Assuming it's possible, but it would take significant time, effort, and investment to achieve for what might be questionable when you've already got humans that can do it quite willingly and freely.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to cost. If you think about the originators of AI, it was a technical exercise to see what they could do and how it could work and how it could operate. Now we're in that stage of, okay, we've created it. We've spent all this money. We need to get a return from it. So therefore now it's like, yes, you can see the agency, you can see a product's coming out from it. But there's still that element, as Richard said, is like, commercially, is it worthwhile as implementing it? Is it worthwhile as using it? Is it worthwhile as going to that extent to make it perfect in every shape or form so we can replace the human in the loop? That doesn't necessarily come as a bias thing. That comes as a cost thing. Yeah. And if you think about all the stories at the moment, Forbes has released one now saying that actually the reality is of all that efficiency that people have been talking about, it's not actually being returned in these early stages of AI being used as a mass product. And I'd probably say that's because a lot of people have absorbed and taken the Kool-Aid on it, but haven't sat down and said, what do I need it for? Drawn out their entire process flow of product, of creation of product through to sale of product, and what are the points where I can implement automation or AI that I can get those efficiency gains. If they haven't done that, then yeah, it's going to fail. Yeah, trying to add something retrospectively is always going to cause you more problems than actually building it from scratch. So I think the ones that are building it from scratch, they're the ones that are succeeding with it. Those are the ones that are trying to just implement it or overlay it within their systems, within their ecosystems, etc. They're the ones that are going to find it's not going to return the investment that they're going to want.
Just so Erin's been contributing loads, so I'll flash up something that she said. So thanks for the contribution. Well, barking there as well. No worries. It was just that last bit really of what she said there. AIs cannot think. They don't have thoughts, ideas. They copy and paste apparent human behaviours, which I think is so true. but we're going to finish now. We are at 1 o'clock, so we've spent 60 minutes talking about this. We could do easily another 60, but alas, we can't. We've taken up enough of Rob and Richard's time because they've given up their time for free today to help and share their views and opinions. So I really appreciate it. And they did clearly do loads of homework as well based on all those answers. And thanks everyone for contributing. We've had loads of people commenting, giving their views, which is really nice to see as always. Clearly, it's an interesting topic that people have a lot of opinions on, and why wouldn't you? So yeah, thanks Rob, thanks Richard.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for having us. It's been,
really appreciate it.
Good.
Yeah, thank you.
If you can stay on for 30 seconds for me, I'm going to end the stream there. Thanks everyone for watching, and there'll be more QB Babble soon. Thanks.
Brilliant.
Cheers.